Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I hope this finds you well for another episode of Solid Ground. I think we're actually up to episode 80 now, so it won't be long that we're celebrating our 100th episode, and thank you for being part of the journey. For people who are new, who are finding this across their social media, Solid Ground's a live program where I touch on the cultural, the political, the ethical, the philosophical, the whatever of the day. Things that have caught my eye, current events, again in politics and the ethical space, whatever. And come from a solid ground of, I would like to suggest, good philosophy, good ethics and good conservative values. As I say, it's a live show. So if you are online, if you're seeing this on the likes of Family First Facebook page or its YouTube channel, your comments are coming live to me here in the studio. If you're on the likes of my LinkedIn page or my Facebook, welcome. It's lovely to have you along. I'll get to your comments after the show. But again, if you want them live, fire them through Family First's Facebook and Family First's YouTube channel. And then things like this happen, you see. Oops. Oh, I see what. Give me a second. I have clicked a wrong button earlier on. I just need to do this and this. Let's have a look. I just need to refresh. Which of the Facebook feeds are coming in. So then I can do things like this. There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. So these are comments coming in from YouTube and Facebook. So good morning to everyone. In fact, as a little bit of not so much a test, I was sitting down with a friend yesterday who actually follows the show. And he was suggesting, which I think is a great idea, because we love everyone saying hello and the weather, so don't stop doing that. But for those who want, and I'll share as much as I can through the show, what's one good thing that's happened this week? If you want to share that with me, as I go through a whole lot of issues, again, there's no shortage, but not only let me know that you're there, but what's one good thing that's happened this morning? But very quickly, good morning to Dee Dee, lovely to have you along. We've got Lynette, good morning. Catherine, lovely to have you along. Michael, good morning to you. We've got Rosie there, good morning. Darren, good morning, lovely to have you along. As always, as you too, Chris, lovely to have you there. I think this is directed to Dee Dee, and I'm going to struggle. So apologies, I'm just going to say Jay, good morning to you as well, and of course through you to Dee Dee. We've got George along, good morning. One of my colleagues is telling me off on my glasses. Yes, I do have new glasses now. I can see even more clearly, which is probably a worry. Good morning to Chrissy. We've got Nigel, good morning. Jackie there and Ray-T, good morning to everyone. Look, it's just so lovely to have you all along. As I say, flick through. Oh, can't forget Murray. Good morning. Hey, there's always a lot to touch on, and I thought we really should touch on the most important thing which is actually happening at the moment in New Zealand, which is this, or particularly if you're in Auckland, is today we find out when the IKEA store, in Auckland. Sorry, I don't know why, maybe it's post-4, I'm still losing my voice, so excuse me for a moment. And before any wit thinks otherwise, it is a cup of coffee. Anyway, tongue-in-cheek, this is the big news in Auckland today. We get to find when the IKEA store is opening, but also in some, I think, positive reflection. This was me last week at something called the Activate Conference. Activate is a pro-life conference run, or a training school in many ways, run by Brendan Malone. Many of you will know Brendan. If you don't, look him up on Facebook. He does amazing work. In fact, he's on Substack as well. So this was me talking, believe it or not, about eugenics, euthanasia, abortion, and a whole lot of other pro-life issues. And for some reason, I'm grinning like a Cheshire cat. I suppose I'm in my element. But I just wanted to, sorry, it's a picture of me, but just to acknowledge Brendan and the work of Activate. So yeah, look them up. He does some amazing work. Darren has actually preempted a topic that I'm going to touch on at the moment. So we'll do so. And Sue, who is one of our wonderful board members, has noted what's been good for her is digesting the wonderful knowledge and stories and the courageous hearts at the Forum of the Family. I think so. I'm still processing it, I have to say. But the first topic that's grabbed my attention as I try to find it is this. So you may have seen some comments I made yesterday, actually on RCR, I've certainly made some social media posts about it. So if you don't know this fellow, Graham Linehan is an Irish comedian or comic. Particularly, he's a writer. So he's behind shows like Father Ted. If you haven't watched Father Ted, and as someone who trained in the priesthood, it's not completely accurate, but there's certainly a lot that is. But he's behind Father Ted. He's behind the likes of Black Books, the IT Crowd. He's actually a very funny writer. But in recent years, he's been outspoken. He's been outspoken pushing back on the trans agenda and trans activists, particularly those who target children. He's basically run out of patience for them. And he brings his wit and his comedy and his Irishness, I would say, to their activism. So he's become a target of the activists. And yesterday, as he arrived at Heathrow Airport, 5 armed security officers, actually that's not quite right, 5 armed police officers arrested him for 3 tweets that he had made. If you jump onto his Substack, so substack.com, and look up his name, he has it all there. He's written up his own piece. He's been banned from Twitter. That's the only condition of his bail. So he's using other forum now, which is great. But arrested because of what he tweeted. Now, this should be quite chilling to all of us because, not just the UK, but there are hints of it developing here in New Zealand, and I'll get to that. The New Zealand angle, that is. But this is just a direct attack on free speech. People are allowed to say things on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, just like I'm doing now, without thinking that police are going to turn up and arrest you. The second point, of course, is the trans activists which are behind this. So it'll be 1 or 2 of them who have put in a complaint, said they feel harmed. They'll be suggesting that the violence, there's language that is violent, and so forth. There is, by the way, no particular threats that he's made. It is quite remarkable, again, some people who are celebrating his arrest to say, well, his aggressive language was threatening. The language, I would suggest, is not particularly threatening, and nor was it directed to any particular person. But they put in a complaint, and the police have pursued it. And so what they're doing, what these activists are doing, are using, or rather misusing, the law to basically silence people. In this case, it's Graham being dragged through an airport, put in a cell and interrogated by police because of what he's tweeted. All the while, in the United Kingdom, the country is falling apart, particularly under the leadership of Keir Starmer. Almost daily, certainly weekly, there are massive protests, particularly in support of Hamas, people waving terrorist flags, people chanting for the death of Israel, for the UK, for America, threatening Israelis and Jews almost every day in the UK. And what are the police doing? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. In fact, I wrote a Substack somewhat on this the other day. I'm sorry that my face disappears for a moment. This was my Substack from last week. I'm just finishing this week's one. But a lot of the Brits now are flying the Union Jack, or they're flying the flag of St. George. So that's the white background with a red cross. And the police and the council workers in the UK are running around busily ripping these flags down because, well, that's what the police are focused on in the UK at the moment. Ripping down British flags and arresting people like Graham Linehan. And why I mention it, not just because I think it's a problem of free speech around the world, but we have a similar problem developing here because in a few weeks' time, the Law Commission here in New Zealand is going to release a report of whether to have hate crimes. And also, I've crossed my wires, not hate crimes. They're also doing a report. This is the Law Commission. The Law Commission is doing a report into hate crime. But it's also doing a report into basically including gender ideology as a reason for discrimination, or to be a discriminatory factor. Absolute madness, but my suspicion, having been a little bit part of this, because Bob and I sat down and talked with them as part of, the submissions, to say that you cannot have discrimination in New Zealand law based on sex and discrimination based on gender identity. You can't have both. Because and I'm sure the Law Commission is going to recommend this, they're going to say, look, transgender people, gender fluid people, obviously need to be respected. That's a given. But they're going to say that needs to be completely protected in law, which is majorly problematic if you're following what's happening in Australia at the moment with Sal Grover, a woman who is running a woman's only app, is now before the courts because she has, according to Australian law, discriminated against a biological man who thinks he's a woman. So what's happening in Australia is likely to come here. So the Law Commission, I suspect, very strongly will be recommending it. And then if that does become law, and to be fair, the politicians have to pass the law, you're going to end up with absurd situations like this because trans activists and others will run off to the police and say that your comments, comments and thoughts are discriminatory, and you're going to go off to prison. It's just absolutely nuts. My wife is texting me, which is why I'm looking down. She's noting, actually, I know it's not coming through the tweet. What Rachel, as in my wife, is saying, she thought that, I'm actually going to read it, what he said, she wouldn't say it. It was swearing, it was vulgar, which is very Graham. But he has the freedom to say it. And I think that's the important thing. And actually, I should probably underline it from my side. I don't find the tweets particularly endearing, but I don't see them as violent rhetoric. And he does and should have the freedom to say it. So it's pretty crazy. And I can see there are 1,000. There's 1,000 comments. Good morning to Dennis. I see that one there. Lovely to have you along. Oops, I'm pressing the wrong buttons all over the place here, guys. Dee is, so good morning to Dennis. Again, he's the Leadership is Changing podcast. If you haven't checked it out, please do so. Dee is saying that England's lost the plot. It certainly has, and Catherine agrees. It's completely lost the plot. Simply Green says he has an interesting history. That's Graham. He does, and it's not here to wave the flag for everything that Graham has done or said, but I think when police are arresting people for their tweets, you're in a pretty crazy spot. Particularly too when you've got the likes of imams in the UK, and we actually have some footage out of Australia now, calling for the destruction of their countries that they now live in, that they want to replace the law with their own law, and again, threats of violence, and nothing happens. This is the double standard, which I think is upsetting. It's upsetting people. Rosie says, too many snowflakes. Well, that's true. Marita's right as well. It is shocking. And actually, I'm pleased a few months back that likes of J.D. Vance, so he's the Vice President of the United States, is calling out the UK and Europe for basically, well, I'm going to use the phrase from Professor Gad Saad, G-A-D-S-A-A-D. Gad Saad is what he calls sympathetic empathy, or suicidal empathy, that these European nations are basically bringing on cultures, ethics and mindsets which are basically undermining and destroying themselves. And you're watching it here live in the UK. But not just the UK, because of course one of our amazing speakers, and I don't know how well you can read this, is from Australia. At our forum was Kirralie Smith. And she is facing similar to Graham. She's had police turn up to her home for the crime, it turns out, of Australia, of calling a biological man a man. It's absolutely absurd. And so Kirralie is facing violence, like they call it AVOs. I think it's the apprehension of violence order or something. Because what she has done is she calls out biological men who are playing in women's sports. That's what she does, amongst other things, advocating too for women's rights. But she's in hot water because of what she's said on social media. So just like Graham, she's been apprehended, in his case arrested, in her case police visiting and an AVO, this order placed against her, because trans activists do not want any discussions at all. And this is the sad reality, and I'm actually trying to write this in my Substack at the moment. This is the bullying nature that's existential or a very essential part of trans activism. Just as they bully their way into women's spaces, insisting that you think of these biological men as women, just as they insist you must use their pronouns, just as you must insist that their sex can be changed. They bully those approaches. They bully their way into sport. And then when anyone stands up against them, be it us in Family First, be it Kirralie there in Australia, or Lyle Shelton also in Australia, Sal Grover, who you'll know, or now Graham Linehan, they'll attack. J.K. Rowling, of course, too, they tried to take her to court. Anyone who challenges this mad ideology begins to face the full weight of the law and the harassment by police, by officials, by media and others. And it's just astounding at one level, as it is just appalling. So yeah, And so Dennis is saying here, I think there's so many comments, the ability to have your voice heard is vital. Well, it is. And, there are different opinions into all of these spaces that we're discussing, and people should be allowed to say them. But what you are seeing happening across society, and certainly in the UK, but I would suggest it's coming here, is that a whole lot of speech is being suppressed. And it's basically being suppressed by bullies who know that their positions on issues are like feet of clay. In other words, they break easily. So they don't want to discuss, they don't want to debate, they don't even have a sense of truth. But what they want to do is stop anyone speaking. So pretty bad, but in a little bit of humour, I came across this yesterday and I put it on my socials, which I thought was quite funny. I thought it was quite funny, so I'll leave it there for a moment, particularly as I quickly knock back another swig of coffee. There we go. Yeah, I just thought it was quite funny. And beginning to sum up, and again, I just wanted to suggest to people, we shouldn't get too hung up on the UK itself. There are strong hints of it developing here in New Zealand already. We're nowhere near the level of the UK. But when you think about how our police actively chose to stand aside and ignore the violence in Albert Park when women were attacked at the Posey Park event, when you think of attempts through the conversion therapy law or attempts through the Harmful Digital Communications Act that we have, again, to silence people, and if you think of effectively the censorship in our media, if you think about the research, say, on the harms of puberty blockers, or what's happening around the world as most jurisdictions pull back, New Zealand does nothing in this space. We don't get any reporting on it pretty much at all. And so that's a problem. That's a problem. And Murray, thank you. Someone appreciates it. I like it. Just going to jump to one other topic. I touched on it briefly on Tuesday about these two rogues, and I'm talking about Key and Clark, going to President Xi's big triumphal military parade yesterday. Look, I could get on a real soapbox on this, as you probably picked up on Tuesday. It really angers me at a deep and quite visceral level. As someone who has worked for years calling out the excesses of the Chinese Communist Party, who's helped people flee the country, and has to have seen good people, particularly democracy activists in the likes of Hong Kong, languish in jails, you'll understand why I begin to get pretty upset when these two decide it's a great idea to go to this giant military parade, which an autocratic dictator put on. So a couple of really key points. The first to note is this military parade was to supposedly celebrate 80 years since the communists liberated China. Nothing could be further from the truth. The communists hid in the hills while the Japanese occupied China, and they waited for the nationalist forces, so they're the ones who eventually fled to Taiwan, or Formosa as it was called then. They hid in the hills, they let other Chinese fight the Japanese, and when the war was over, in many ways because of the attacks from America, the UK, Australia, and Russia, once the war was over, the nationalists were so weakened from a decade plus of fighting that the communists then came out of the hills and defeated the nationalists. So in other words, the communists did very little and then attacked the nationalists and won, which is why in 1949 China became a communist country. But Xi there on the left is very keen to rewrite history, which is one of the big parts of the military parade and everything that he's doing at the moment. He's rewriting the history to try and make it to the Chinese people and to the world that it was the communists who defeated the Japanese. As I say, nothing could be further than the truth. And Key and Clark are happy to be part of that. They're there as private citizens, so they've actively, deliberately and specifically chosen to attend, to be part of this rewriting of history. The other part, amongst others, is Clark in particular. I'm not trying to defend Key, but Clark is the one who's often on social media and travelling around the world talking a huge game about human rights. And I was struck a couple of weeks ago, as I mentioned on Tuesday, she's at the Gaza border with Egypt, and that's really important to underline. She was on the Egyptian side of the border, not beating up the Egyptians for what they are or are not doing, which, by the way, they're doing nothing. in terms of aid, I mean, but berating Israel, which she's welcome to do. It's a free world. But there she is, talking about the horrors of war and human rights. And here we are, 2 weeks later, she's joining an autocratic despot in China to celebrate a military parade. I mean, can you get any more, I'm trying to think of what the polite word is, distorted than that? 2 weeks ago, decrying war, decrying human rights abuses as she perceives them in the Israel-Gaza conflict, and yet yesterday Helen Clark is with an autocratic dictator celebrating the machines of war in a giant military parade. And both she and Key stand alongside basically a gallery of rogues, from Putin, from the president of Belarus, Kim Jong-un from North Korea, the president of Iran, the president of Cuba. The list goes on and on. If you look at the footage, it was a parade of despots, and these two decided it was perfectly appropriate to go along. And you know who's laughing? The Chinese communists, because these guys help legitimize them. And so I just think it's absolutely shocking. I think it's absolutely appalling what they're doing. And then interestingly too, which I thought I'd just quickly put up before I finish, just to really emphasize how bad these guys are. This was a hot mic moment yesterday where Xi, again the dictator who runs China, and Putin, who needs no introduction, were talking about organ transplants and how basically they could live to 150 years old. I mean, it tells you a lot, tells you a lot about the nature of these people, but really important to understand, really important to understand, organ transplants, particularly in China, are often forced. Groups like Falun Gong and others, it's forced organ transplants. It's absolutely terrible. And I did actually, I'm just trying to find the setting, I did an interview on RCR 2 weeks ago with Margot McVicker. She's followed this for a long time. It's something I'm very aware of. This is the nature of the Chinese regime. I mean, you hear me talk about Taiwan, the Tibetans, the threats to our own national security and sovereignty. But, you know, another dark part of the Chinese Communist Party is actually forced organ harvesting. It's horrid. It's absolutely horrid. And it's happening. And again, you can hear it in my voice. It upsets me because these guys decide it's a great idea. And I think Dennis has got some actually good insights today. I mean, and I'd agree. They still want to be relevant. That's why. That's why they attend these things. And there's probably a whole lot of freebies. And who knows, there could be commercial arrangements down the line or whatever. Who knows? Very difficult to prove these things. What we do know in New Zealand is actually a lot of money does flow from the CCP into our various organisations, and I'm sad to say into our political parties, including National and Labour, but exceptionally difficult to prove fully and totally. But as I say, you know, these are the people that Key and Clark thought it was perfectly fine to go and just hang around with. And again, to celebrate a military parade, the weapons of violence, as people who talk about peace. I mean, you couldn't get any more hypocritical. And on top of that, Clark in particular, who only a few weeks ago was talking about the problems of war. So we've got a bit of a problem, guys. We've got a bit of a problem. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. Time has flown by, as always. I thought I'd just leave something slightly humorous with a bit of an edge to it here. But as always, lovely to have you with me here on Solid Ground. It's always a pleasure to have you along. I've been overwhelmed this morning by the comments. I'm going to have a look at those later. Oh, a final reminder, I almost forgot. Political playback tonight from 5. Bob and I will be talking all the politics of the last week or so, actually. We didn't have political playback last week because of the forum, but we're back tonight from 5 o'clock live, so bring your thoughts and comments. But in the meantime, have a great rest of your day. It's been marvellous to have you along.